Sure. There we go.
Okay. Hello, my name is Wendy Perron. I have the distinct honor to introduce and interview Benjamin Millepied. He's one of the major choreographers of today, someone I'm interested in, especially because he combines ballet and modern vocabulary. And he's just done a show here in New York at the Parallel Performing Arts Center. And in a week or two, he's opening a huge, big Romeo and Juliet suite at the Park Avenue Armory. And I'm told he has other projects in the future. So he's a very prolific and fascinating choreographer. And we'll be talking to him. I'll be talking to him in this hour.
Thank you, Wendy.
So Benjamin, one of the things that I noticed in watching your work this time is you have a way of pulling things out and continuing things. It's not like you just hit a position and hold it, but it just keeps going. Like if there's a lift, it's not just lift up and down, but it's like lift and spiral and keep going. And I really appreciate that as someone who's choreographed herself, because it's hard to keep going. So my first question is, how do you think about flow?
I think interestingly, I draw really mainly, essentially from the music. So how did I get to this point where it's true that there's a level of, I think things are very organic in my choreography, or how transitions are really important. And I would say transitions both now, maybe in solos, in duets, but also in group pieces. I think I realized a few years ago that in a way the idea of what you wanted to create, like the strong ideas were very clear for sections, but how you get to one, I think you see a good choreographer from how he transitions from one section to the next, really, like a really good one. So I really started to work on transitions, and I think that applies to all the dancing and all the movement in my work now. But I also, I think, really try these days to really go places that are more unexpected with movement, even though it remains organic. So I think essentially there's several reasons. I would say in any case, Balanchine's choreography and Robin's choreography compared to other choreographers, I'm saying even British choreographers, was always quite organic to me. But I also will say that one of the things that's more particular about me is that I started with African dance, and I learned how to move my back before I went to ballet class, when I was 11, and that was really something that was life changing. I grew up in Senegal, and then my mom was a fantastic teacher for African dance. She was teaching there as well as obviously when we went back to France. But I also had the opportunity to do courses with like major teachers, and I remember one very famous teacher in France is Elsa Olieston, who I did this workshop with, and for 3 hours one day, she gave one step. She would give one step and then leave the studio for 2 hours, and then really it was. The one step was like to understand how to move the back and like feel the back, and we just did it for hours. And I'll never forget that day, because I think that's something that even in ballet where the head's supposed, this thing with port de bras, that the head goes down and the head comes up, is something that you see more rarely nowadays, particularly in just traditional ballet companies. I wouldn't say at New York City Ballet at all. But the idea that the head, there's more impact when the head comes up if it goes down, so this idea that there is movement in the back, there is movement in the upper body, and that you're not just, this sort of stiff body. And also, what I also learned outside New York City Ballet is that if you want to move fast, you actually have to be relaxed. You have to be in the body. You can't have tension. You have to have a relationship to the floor, which I learned with Stanley Williams. Also, I would say, is how to use the floor, and then how to give you the ability to change directions really fast. But so all of these things are probably, part of the reason that today there is this sense of, I create positions, but there's always movement in the sense, even in the stillness. It's definitely true of my work and how we come out of maybe positions that we hit that are very more graphic images, but that there's always breath and there's always movement.
Hmm. Yeah, I didn't know you grew up in Senegal, and I just want to catch the name of the woman that gave you the back rippling.
Yes,
Elsa
Elsa
Wollaston.
Oliaston.
Olyason.
Yeah, and she's still alive, and but it was like really very much a defining experience.
Yeah, and now there's a big school of contemporary dance in Senegal. The
Yes,
Germain
absolutely.
Akony.
That's
Yeah.
right. L'école des sables.
Well, that is so interesting because as I was watching how you were moving a lot with the spine, I thought, well, there's an influence of Trisha Brown there,
Yes.
because she moves the spine a lot in
Yes.
the arms.
I did do contact improvisation. It was actually Wally Cardona was in the house on Saturday night.
Yes, I noticed he was there. Yeah.
Yes, and I did work briefly with him, but also it was an impactful experience in my early 20s, I think. He reached out and we did some piece, and he put me in one of his works. We worked together. I went to to the Catskills even for a period of time with him, and I got a sense. I got to play around with contact improvisation, and that was also very much something that stayed with me, and that I love to watch when I watch Trisha's work.
Yeah, and I could see that. What I saw that seemed to be featured in your work was a sense of touch, and again, not like ballet, like the cavalier holding out his hand and the woman takes the hand and then they do a pas de deux. It was really like using the different parts of the body and the head on the arm and just different ways that you use touch that make the couples look tender,
right.
not showy, but tender.
Yeah.
And caring.
Yeah, that's also, I would, well, it's my sensibility and sort of my probably my own relationship to touch, to intimacy, but I would say that it's also a continuation of the work that I did with Jerry, because I think with Jerry Robbins, this idea of really being yourself and just to never the calmness, to not dance for the audience, but to dance with people around you, and to this real quality of being human, being yourself. There's something, the simplicity of it. I think it's something that I really loved, and then in a way I'm just going with it in my own direction. Yeah, I think some of the dancers that I've worked with me the longest really have that quiet sort of quality of presence and simplicity and touch that feels realistic, that doesn't feel held or fake. Yeah.
And with that too, it looked like the focus was choreographed, like when they would actually look at each other. Sometimes they'd be touching and not actually looking, and then there'd be moments where their eyes would meet. And that also, and I thought of Robbins too, and how, like in Dances at a Gathering, each pair of people really care about each other and really look at each other. And I think that's partly how they make it real.
Yes, it's really only recently that I start to, I think, have more complex relationships in my pieces. I think forever I was making dances and duets that were very much this idolized version of love, very harmonious, very, for like personal reasons. And only recently, and I think you could see that a little bit in the last piece on the other side, in some of the duets, where you can sense that there's more than that. There's more complexity between the dancers as people, and certainly, I don't choreograph every look, but I would say that I'm getting much more and more specific with my choreography, certainly in the last 2 years, for some reason. So I do sometimes actually say, look here, don't look, things like that. Are you still there? Or are you frozen? Oh no. Oops. Oh, I guess I'm alone now. We'll wait for Wendy to be back. There you are.
Did we both pop out, or did only I pop out?
Just you. I think we're still on. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I to jump back in. Yeah, there's the dancers really inspire the work. Their sensibility. I choose them very specifically for which piece of music. They already inspire me before I get in the studio, and then it's really it's a combination of really letting them. I give a lot of freedom because it's theirs already by the time they walk in the studio to some extent. It's every section is. I couldn't have imagined anyone but Courtney doing that solo. I couldn't have imagined anyone but Daphne doing this duet. So, but yeah, I things are a lot more specific now for me than they used to be for some reason.
Yeah, I could see where sometimes the music carried the person. If a person was doing a solo, it seemed like the music absolutely carried the person. There was a section in well, okay, I have a question about Reflections, the Barbara Kruger set. At what point do the dancers know that there'll be that set and I love what it says. It says stay, and then it says I'm thinking of you, thinking of me. So it's such a poetic idea of two people finding and losing each other. At what point do the dancers know that that's what it says?
Well, I've made two pieces with Barbara, and actually there's a set that we couldn't use at the Parliament because at one point there's a drop that comes in that says go also. So it says stays go. And the way that I work with Barbara is that I make the dance fully. She comes and watches it when it's finished, and she responds to it. And it's always brilliant what she does with it, and she the last piece was there's three projections, three walls that she projects words on, and every section had a different phrase. And it was phenomenal because she managed to find phrases that always brought an interesting tension to the dance. It's never literal. It's always it always throws you off, and it just brought a layer to the sections that was really striking. So I love working with Barbara.
Yeah, that was great. I loved just contemplating those words, and then at a certain point, the floor is lit only in sections, so you only see some of the words. And I was like, how do they do that lighting? I don't know how that happened. It was so defined, that square on the floor.
Yeah, well, you just create boxes of lights, and now they're really easy to do. The lights actually, you just configure them electronically. But no, it's the dancers discovered it at the last minute, certainly. Just like we discover every piece as we go, and pieces reveal themselves, and it's such a phenomenal process. That's just to be in creation with the dancers these days.
Yeah, and you have to allow that. I also love the set for the second piece with the light towers, and then at a certain point, those orange lights glowed in the middle of everything. It was really great because it was like, okay, these are light towers that you would have at a performance, but they created their own optics, their own colors.
Yes, and also they're for the most part they're just there without much effect. They're become part of the scenery, and that was Liam Gillick's conceptual proposal for the piece, which again brings an interesting layer to it, I think.
And in that piece, to the Philip Glass music, I really saw it in terms of flow that I mentioned before, and a bigger group, and it was really like surging back and forth, and you didn't. I mean, sometimes Philip Glass could overwhelm choreography, but it didn't at all. You met it in such a great way.
Thank you. No, I mean, it's certainly it's interesting. It's music that also carries a lot of a lot by itself, right? So in the sense that there's so much atmosphere, and it's so specific, and it's quite emotional, and it has so much movement in it. So it's used a lot by choreographers, but I actually find it's quite difficult to do well. This piece was I made years ago, and when I was talking about transitions, I think this was a piece where I really worked on the transitions and how we cover and discover and cover, like, things appear and disappear. And it's a really hard piece on the dancers because it's 17 minutes straight for all of them. But it's a work that I like very, very much. I would say also about, on the other side, that I first started to work on this piece in probably 2006. I made a version, then I made another version in 2014, and then finally I worked on this version this summer. But again, it's actually music I find that has, I would say, something similar to Bach, which holds to me both the beauty of the world and the tragedy of the world. Like, it's really music that I come back to, and as I grow as a person, I want to revisit. And actually, I find it was the first time that I felt the piece worked for me on Saturday, after all these years of trying to actually meet that music, which really tells.
Which piece? On the other side, or the
last work? Yeah, the last work on the other side.
Yeah.
Because there's depth, and it's sort of the deep. I think probably the deepest piece on the program. But just that talk about the human experience, and more personal, probably the most personal piece of the three. Yeah.
Well, there's a moment in that where, and I know the dancer's name is Courtney because I saw her at Baryshnikov Art Center. Yeah. She sort of sinks into this group, and their heads kind of go along with her. It's like they're helping her breathe. It's like they're helping her take her last breath. Yeah. And I thought, oh, on the other side, is that like on the other side of life? It was so moving. It was just, I was almost crying watching it. It was beautiful.
Well, it was literally, I haven't said this, but literally this solo for me, I mean, the music of this Etude 17 is so epic. It feels like a whole life. Literally, it's a 7 minute, it's a 7 or 8 minute solo, which is a hard thing to keep the stage with music that is so full of life. It's a really hard thing to do, and Courtney certainly did it brilliantly. But to me, really, there's a sense that it's a whole life, and that breathing thing was really. When my mother passed, actually, we were in the hospital, and for the last 3 days, this is what we were breathing with her. Yeah, so it was that's actually exactly what that is in that moment. That's why it's a really simple idea, but it was for some reason when I got to the end, I had the image for the beginning, and then I had the sort of the end idea, and it really captures that moment for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very powerful. Yeah. And I love that, because a lot of times people think about, well, there's narrative dance and there's abstract dance. Right. And there's just dance for, dance with the music, or it tells a story. But what you've done is draw from both traditions, really. And so when something emotional like that happens, it kind of creeps up on you. You're not set up for it. It just happens through the music and dancing.
Yeah, I'm really taking so much pleasure from, I think, the minute you start to really draw into the people that are in front of you, and their sensibility. You can tell stories. You can tell stories, and there's obviously always a sense that, it's, even if you're quite specific in your head, people will have their own ideas of what you made. But I find that really inspiring these days, and I just worked on a piece by a very famous French singer who passed between think early in the 90s. Barbara, who is a phenomenal writer who wrote songs really about her life, and they're incredibly well written. And to work on that was also a breakthrough, I think, because it's so to actually accompany it with dance and to not be literal, to find imagery that captures what it's about in a deep way. It's really like walking on the on a wire. But it's sort of, I had no choice. Like, and I told you actually in the piece, there's from the dancer, there's 5 women and 4 men, and the youngest woman is 25 and the oldest is 75. And the reason I wanted this amazing ex ballerina of Paris Opera, Florence Claire, was because it was 75, is because there are stories that a 75-year-old can tell, not a 25, not a 35, not a, and it's only a few dances that she does in the piece. But when we did it the first, because I worked with her alone at Paris Opera, and then we brought her in and we added her to the work, and it was very, very moving for the dancers, exactly for that reason. Because when you talk about, there's a song called La Solitude, solitude, which is when you have somebody like this person is embodying that story. It makes complete sense. She's able to actually touch the gravity of that song. So no, I definitely enjoy so much choosing my dancers for their sensibility and who they are, and they inspire stories that are personal, but it's a combination.
It seems like you also choose your costume designers in a very careful way. And I noticed, but let me just say that one of the most striking costumes I ever saw was when you did a piece, I forget the name of the title of the piece.
Never wear.
With Iris van Herpen did the black, toe shoe boots, the black toe shoe boots that crackled when the dancer moved. I mean, that was so memorable. It was just wild. What was the title of that piece?
Neverwhere. It's a sonata for viola and piano by Nico Mili. Yeah, I mean, I hope that now I'm good at selecting, because I think I ruined many ballets by having bad costumes, which you really can. And I think part of it was also figuring out how I wanted my work to be dressed, coming from New York City Ballet, and it's just having it sometimes and neo sort of like, that's not the right word, but it's sort of, I had to figure out exactly how I wanted the who were the people in my dances and how I wanted them to be dressed. But I did have some luck, like with Yoris, who did a costume that's on the cover of a costume dance book today. So it was a really, really incredible one. Yeah.
And then in this performance for the second piece, Janie Taylor did the costumes, and she was a wonderful dancer with New York City Ballet, and I'm sure you've partnered with her, so she's sort of part of your inner circle, I guess. It was nice to see her costumes.
Yeah, Janie has always done amazing costumes for me, and she was a really outstanding, incredible dancer, and also is someone who communicates that heritage and that way of dancing of balancing. But also, she's also a really, really gifted choreographer. I don't know, we presented 2 or 3 works of hers with the Dance Project, 2 in New York, I think. And she's really, really gifted. So now she runs the school at the Colburn School in LA, and she's doing an outstanding job. I saw the students dance last year, and I was really impressed with how free and how beautifully they danced. So I think we'll continue to hear more from her,
Yeah, that's great. So you're going into the Park Avenue Armory with this big Romeo and Juliet suite. And one of my questions is, you're so good at these intimate, touching, looking, organic duets. How do you expand that intimacy for the huge, I don't even know how big it is, but just the humongous Park Avenue Armory?
Well, this Romeo and Juliet is quite different, I would say, because it's when I decided to do Romeo and Juliet, which I resisted for years, but had this experience. Actually, the day that we open Romeo and Juliet at the Armory, we're also showing on Nowness this short film that I made with Margaret Qualley and Shamik Moore, which includes it's a scene, the balcony scene from the Shakespeare, with the Prokofiev score and with dance. So in fact, the way that I came back to that score, which I had heard too often, and was through the idea of using it for film, and as I've worked a lot with video for 20 years, I started to think about creating a stage production and using what I call live cinema, which is part of what is sometimes too unrealistic for me on stage in some of these ballets is actually the most sort of emotionally dramatic things that happen: a murder, real love in a way that's really visceral and realistic and so forth. And so the production navigates between the live performance and a camera which is really, really well operated by Sebastian Marcovici, another dancer. The camera before the eyes of the audience sometimes totally leaves the stage, and really the theater becomes the set for the performance. And what happens is that you fall in love with these characters in the flesh, but then they become cinema characters, and intimacy and violence and death, and so things that can feel realistic when you go to the movies can feel realistic in the performance, or more so. I mean, at least we really aim to, and it's quite powerful. It was a surprise to me, even if this was an idea, but the way that the production works seamlessly between cinema and live performance without ever feeling like you're never feel like you're watching something pre-recorded. It's magical because it just becomes cinema and you're in it. Is what's different about the production. And it's also, I'd say there's a nod to Jerry there, because it's really Romeo and Juliet suite. It's not Romeo and Juliet. So
you did West Side Story suite.
Well, yeah, I mean, to some extent, because I took tableaus from the Romeo and Juliet. I took my favorite, moments of music, which, in hindsight, when I finally decided to go in the studio and make it, I mean, the music is such great rhythms. It's so wonderful for dance that it was really a blast to make. But it is Romeo and Juliet suite, so it's very much like West Side Story. So again, it's not forgetting my heritage, or being thankful to my heritage.
Your heritage in terms of Jerome Robbins.
Yes. I mean, when I was 16, my meeting at School of American Ballet was with, it was with Peter. They called me in the office early in the year, and really Peter Martins. Yeah, Jerry wanted me to potentially be in West Side Story that he was starting to work on for the company. That's the piece that was sort of that brought me in. Yeah.
Oh, so say more about working with Jerome Robbins. He was such an amazing dance maker and musicals maker, and he did so many beautiful pieces for New York City Ballet. I mean, you talked a little bit about him and how he wanted people to be more real and not project so much, but tell me something about the pieces of his that you were in, or remember how he worked.
No, I mean, I was so lucky. It was my first year at the school where he decided to make a ballet for the school. So really, when I was 16, I was in 2 and 3 part inventions. So that was my really young, suddenly working 6 months with Jerry. And then I was in Brandenburg Concerto. I was in Les Noces, which I did the Matchmaker, which was his last piece.
Oh.
Those were really the 3 last works that he made on the company, plus working on all the other ones. Jerry, there was something of, again, a sensibility that there was a similarity, I think, in personal sensibility for some reason. I think there was a connection beyond him being a choreographer and the dancer, and he really did, take me on the wing quite a bit at that age, and took me to the theater and took me to see a lot in New York. And I was very, very fortunate to have that education at the time. But really, this, he loved dancers, people who sort of knew who they were, I would say, even though, I mean, I would say as far as this sort of clarity of standing on stage with presence and sincerity and spontaneity. He really used to smile so much when he was in the studio and just was watching good dancing.
That is so different from what a lot of other people say about him.
No, he really, yes, he could be tough, and he had no patience. I think the thing that he had was that if he thought something, he thought that you should read his mind, like at all times. So if he didn't see something he wanted, he would go, he would snap so fast, like, but in reality, he loved watching good dances. And he loved watching good dances. I would say particularly in the studio, it was remarkable. And we were lucky. I mean, we had such amazing dancers performing his works at the time. If you think of those runs of Dances at the Gathering with Damien and Kira and Jock and Jennifer Ringer, and it was a really special time. But I think the reality, the sincerity of the moment is something that was really, really important, and it made dance alive. This idea that the depth came from the music and relationship to the music. I mean, responding to Chopin with all that encompasses, the melancholia, the old Europe, is something that I'm actually finding now is more difficult for. I think we were a generation that was exposed to that music. We were still closer to that music. When I've seen various productions in Europe of the Chopin ballets, I think it's harder for the younger generation to have a relationship to that music, and certainly Jerry had this relationship to the 50s, to the 60s, to Bernstein, to Glass of the 80s, but and Chopin, which probably is my favorite ballet of his, to dance Dances at the Gathering, was really, really special. So the sincerity, the being true to the moment, and also this idea that whenever, I mean, he said this to me when I was 16. Misha was performing a suite of dances at the time.
Let me just go back. Misha Baryshnikov.
Baryshnikov was performing.
He made it for. I think he made a suite of dances for Baryshnikov. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was after the premiere, and I was there, and the next day we were doing a run through of 2 and 3 part inventions, and as always, I was dying at the end of the run, and he came up to me and he said, "Didn't you see, Baryshnikov last night? Whenever he leaves the stage, you always feel like he could go back and do it again. That he doesn't give 100%. He actually gives like this sense of the easiness, the quality, this Fred Astaire quality of dance is easy at all times. It's improvised as I go. It's not. I'm not dancing steps here. I'm making them up in the moment. I would say those are really the most important things about Jerry, and all the imagery. He always used to, the importance of imagery in rehearsal. He'd always connect the movements to images. One of my favorite ones is the end of the Adagio in Suite of Dances, where you reach up to the sky, and you reach up to the sky and you just turn your hand like that, which feels like a totally spiritual moment. And Jerry used to say, you're changing a light bulb. And but again, it's like the simplicity of it. I mean, of the movement, and just, it was all the time like that. And you can't replace that. It's imagery, because you're dealing with someone that had extraordinary culture and just passed it on through with incredible finesse. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think about the beginning of Dances at a Gathering, when the first man goes down and touches the ground, and then the last moment is everyone looking up at the sky.
Yeah.
So you feel like you've been through that whole journey with him.
That's absolutely extraordinary moments. Yeah. That those the whole idea of the opening of Dance at the Gathering, that the dance is a memory. First of all, it's almost like a ghost-like, the entire thing. but that you have, when you walk in, you have to in that first solo, you're actually conveying something that's important for the rest of the piece. So you walk in, and I remember him yelling at me because I worked on it when I was 16 with him, and he would be like, look around, what do you see, and he would, so you actually really coming in the room and you're noticing, oh, this is the bar that I did my first pliés to, and this is the piano, and here's the window. And so the key here is actually when you talk to yourself and you're experiencing that in the moment, the audience does too.
Yeah.
And so it's that opening solo is sets up the entire work, and I think the end is really, you're looking up at the storm going in the distance, and it captures life. Life is on stage with these individuals. It's life going by. It's the weather changing. It's the ground and the earth, and touching it at the end that you just danced on. So it's a really really extraordinary piece. Yeah.
For Robbins, he kept going back to Chopin for a lot of different pieces, and it's like we know Balanchine kept going back to Stravinsky.
Yeah.
Do you feel there's a composer? I've seen you do a lot of pieces to Philip Glass and also David Lang. Is there one composer that you feel you go back to, or are there several?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main one really has been Nico. I mean, we've done we just premiered a piece called Me, You, We, They at the Philharmonie in Paris a year and a half ago. I mean,
Say his whole name.
Nico Muhly, which is really one of the greatest living composers, I would say. Nico and I are going to continue to collaborate, and certainly and I think we do bring each other to new places. There's something about composers when they choreograph for dance. If you think of Stravinsky, even making the Rite of Spring, it's just having this layer of imagination. Tchaikovsky writing for dance, that it also has the potential to take composers to new places and how they write for music. So certainly Nico is I think my closest collaborator. I'm going to collaborate with Gabrielle Smith in 2028, a commission from the Paris Philharmonie and the LA Philharmonic, and she's an extraordinary talent as well. But there are there's Caroline Shaw is outstanding. There's also Andy Akiho, who I did my piece Be Here Now with Barbara Kruger with, who I think the world of, and certainly there's also crossover, composers, songwriters. Like I just did a large work with November Ultra, who's a really fantastic songwriter in France, who sings in English. But no, there's always it's in regards to Stravinsky and Balanchine, I think also there was so much respect from Balanchine to Stravinsky, and taking the way Agon, which is this really unbelievable breakthrough ballet, the seriousness with which Balanchine approached that at the time, and I think they both went new places, with it. So there's always something very exciting with being delivered a new score.
Yeah, that's great. Another whole subject is one thing that I noticed in really the first piece, the reflections piece, I think more that piece than the other pieces, there was a kind of androgyny, not only in the look of the dancers, but in who you paired with whom. And so there seemed to be as many same-sex duets as opposite-sex duets. And then I saw in the marketing for the Romeo and Juliet suite, there's something about, I forget what gender bending, I forget what the words were. But talk about that.
Yeah, I think for Romeo and Juliet, it was when I decided to make it, I thought, why do I have what right do I have to make it a man and a woman, basically, today? It was more like I have a company of dancers who I love, who are women who love women, men who love men, like, and why would I just make this about a man and woman when it's this universal, visceral love story? And the result with it was quite surprising, because in fact you see two men dancing a lot. You don't see two women having an intimate sort of experience like in Romeo and Juliet, with this kind of intimacy, with the cinema, actually seeing them kiss up close. And so it was quite, the reception in France at the time about it was quite strong. I mean, there was people who were really pissed off, also because we don't announce casting, so they don't know what they're going to see. But believe it or not, in France, it was the talk of on television, on the radio, and everything when we opened it at the time. Like a lot of people thought, how dare I, change this tradition of a man and a woman, which I don't think it won't be a problem in New York, but
well, it seems like you've already pissed off people in Paris.
Yes.
With going against tradition a few years ago, when you wanted it to be a more diverse company, and there was a lot of shush over that.
Yeah, I think interestingly, like the thing about the diversity in Paris Opera, which was when I arrived, very much like, what, like the company being entirely white is what makes it amazing, basically, that everybody looks the same, which for me, as deep down, I mean, obviously it's completely, it goes completely against also what dance is. Dance, the richness of the experience of dance is watching individuals who are different, who are, Balanchine actually used to say, all these different flowers bending these different ways, and absolutely, like that, you want a garden of dancers who are different one from the next, and who have a different energy, a different way of phrasing, and that's what will make a giant group piece super powerful. Not everyone being on the same count, everyone being the same height and being completely white. So deeper than that, there was, for me, a relationship to dance that was utterly corrupt, and how they think of dancing and what great dancing is. And it was funny, I took my son to Paris Opera for the first time as an older boy, last year, and he's only seen LA Dance Project, basically, so obviously a very diverse group of high, tall, short, like everybody. And he walked out of Paris Opera and thought that, like, the question he asked me was like, Dad, why do they look all the same? And so it just, obviously, there's lots of wonderful dancers and all that, but I think ultimately is just it just isn't what dance is, and dance should have diversity, and dance, it's and also, the thing that was a bit of the other issue there is, like, what do you put on stage? How do you create that? Obviously by changing the company, but also by what choreographers you bring in, what stories you tell. There was a lot of work to do on that end, because it's not sufficient to just change the dancers. It's also who you bring into the company and what you put on stage.
Mm-hmm. On the other side, is there anything you miss about being at Paris Opera Ballet, about the size of it, or the training, or the access to a huge stage?
Today, no. I really have a very specific way of how I approach dance, and what I try to pass on to the dancers I work with, which is, very much a technical virtuosity that I find it, allows you to have incredibly different movement quality, and also this whole idea of fast, slow, being able to phrase on your own, the freedom, making the dancers feel like, what I want to see is who they are, and who they are is how well they will phrase things, and how they will. So in that respect, like, I love exactly the way that I'm set up now, and I don't. I have the opportunity to do. I only think about the piece I want to make next and who I want to make it with, and that's all. I'm not working on point shoes as much, certainly, because I also I'm dedicated to sort of where I live and like where I create, and don't freelance at all. Really, I just license some pieces. So I don't work on point as much, and that would be fun to get back to at some point, because there are ballets that, I think ultimately the thing that's maybe different, with me, I would say, is that when you say I navigate between movement that's more organic to more balletic to that's all in me, and the music sort of tells me what it demands, and certainly there's pieces that should be on point. If I want to do the Brahms Haydn variations, I want them to be on point. If I want, so that's where I have pieces in me that I would like to do on point. So,
a question is coming in on text from an audience person. What are you looking for when you're hiring a dancer? What qualities are you looking for?
So again, it's very much someone who walks in the room and will dance in a way that feels highly personal, that tells me who they are as they move in space. Obviously, I also prefer for the dancer to be quite versatile. So because there are moments of quick feet and moving around space, and so to have sort of a balletic base, but I also have dancers who have less than that. So I think ultimately somebody who I'm the moment they walk in, I'm interested to know who they are, finding out or watching them, that they draw my attention. Right. I notoriously didn't do auditions for years. We would invite people on video, and I would watch them dance maybe sometimes 30 seconds, and then I would talk to them for 25 minutes. So that's really then because the company is small, I'm also interested to know who they are. So I spend as much time talking to them as possible and figuring out what they're interested in, and so on. But yeah, I would say that's the most important quality is the personality coming through in a way that they're expressing themselves with some level of confidence, I would say.
And then they bring something to it. Then they're going to bring something to each piece. Do you have company class? Does Sebastian give company class? Is there something every morning where the dancers can warm up and
yes,
and develop their technique?
Yes, we actually, because of the rep, we vary quite a bit, the teachers that teach. I've started just recently to teach a little bit again, because you pass on so much of, I teach a ballet class, and I would say it's very close to what I think was the greatest ballet class that I ever took, which was Stanley Williams' class, because it's that ballet class was about movement quality. It was about how the floor is an extension of you to some extent, and not something you fight against, or movement quality is not something you hear much. You rarely hear in ballet classes. It's like movement quality comes in phrasing and how you shape things and how you. So with Stanley, it was the full body was deep in the music. Also, it was like he forced you to really listen and to go, instead on top of the music, going in the music. So when I teach, it's really what I share.
And Stanley Williams is Danish?
Yes, he was Danish. He was brought over by Balanchine, I believe. And for me, it was the greatest ballet class. There's sort of like every ballet class, and then way above there's Stanley. I just think, when I was in Lyon and I was 13, I was in the contemporary dance section, and we had a Cunningham class every day, and we had a teacher who every day taught Cunningham with this idea of movement quality, not just this not this shape and this graphic, but like how you this, and that it brings your body, makes your body alive to movement, alive to music inside, inside your head, and how to make something organic and felt. And it wasn't really until I went back, I got to know Stanley's class 2 years later, that I reconnected with this idea. For me was the same, and it was the first ballet class that was like that, and the first ballet class since that was like that.
Yeah. Oh, great. I think we have something else from an audience person, Catherine Shepis, and she says, there is a precision and fluidity in your dancers that I don't see in New York City Ballet ever. I saw Reflections Saturday night, which is the performance we were talking about, flawless. And then this is the question part, I think, is it only about allowing their personality, or is your direction different in LADP, I think?
Well,
yeah.
I think maybe something that I've developed more is this sense of actually that there's no tension in the body, like I really, in order to have as much clarity with how to show something, show movement in space. I mean, it really, when you watch Courtney the other night, it sometimes her arms and her body looks like she's chopping the air with a sword. It just, there's this clarity and this quality, the virtuosity in shaping space and movement that I show every day in the studio when I make the dance. That is really specific. I would say it is really, really specific. And then you can do that. You can move fast. But while having this, because again, the floor is not your enemy. The floor is, when you go up, Stanley used to always say, when you go up, you go down. It's just this idea of like, what are you talking about? When I go up, I go down. When I jump up, I jump down. It was just, he used to put his hand over my head in first movement. And and this idea that like, actually when you push away, you're so you always have, when you have this connection, you land and you can change direction, and you can, so it's very much a relationship of how your lower body, how your whole body works with the floor, and how relaxed you are. And she was pointing out what qualities, like movement quality. No, is that what she said?
Fluidity. Yeah.
Fluidity. Yeah. And the fluidity I show, and they work with me, and and then that's but that's great to hear that there's something specific when you see our dancers. That we do. There is a very much a way of dancing that I believe in, and that I share, and we promote and develop. So
yeah, I think that sort of oppositional thing, like you go down to go up, or you come up and you come down, is a basic principle. But I think a lot of times when people think about ballet, especially women in ballet, it's up in the point shoes, everything's up, everything's ethereal. Yeah. And it loses depth if it doesn't also have a downward pull.
Yes, Stanley used to teach a Friday night class for the girls at SAB, which
because mostly the men had him for a teacher.
Yeah, mostly the men, and I went to watch this class a few times, and it was unbelievable. That class for the women was just, again, I mean, his class was just absolutely outstanding. Just the finesse of it. The finesse of it was, and unfortunately he spoke so little, he explained so little, that I think a lot of the concepts were not necessarily fully understood. And I wish there were more classes like Stanley in general. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about what you have cooking for the future? What LADP has going on?
Yeah, well, one of the programs that I started in Paris is called La Ville Dansée, which is, every year, every 2 years, we, I think about a project that takes place in the city that is free, But the idea isn't just to put dance on the street. The idea is to actually use the city for not also a place for because of its aesthetic, but also because of its history, potentially. So that's something that I started to think about in LA organically, because frankly, there's so few theaters who program dance, and then you have all this city with so much different eclectic architecture, such amazing history. And we did start to perform at the train station, and also performing with Yuval Sharon, the stage director, who was kind of using the city, not really was using the city in that way, and using the places in the city and creating work around the symbolic history of a place and so forth. So we did La Ville Dansée 2 years ago, and I commissioned something like 10 or 12 dances across the city from south to north. A lot of the stories had a sort of symbolic violence, I would say. I think, colonialism stories, but also, like, again, that's something that I became really interested in as when I became the director of Paris at Paris Opera. Was this idea that everybody doesn't have the same experience as you in the city, right? There's people from different culture that will walk through a street, walk in front of a building, go to the museum, stand in front of works that were stolen from their culture, 100 years back. Just this idea of empathy. I read a book, a social science book of a teacher in Saint-Denis in the suburbs of Paris, who took a class of kids who never actually never go to Paris when you live in these suburbs, because often the police checks your papers, and it's it's really complicated. He took a class to the richest arrondissement in Paris and spent a few weeks, and the children write about their experience, how they're received in that area, what it's like for them. And it really opened my eyes to really this idea that we really don't have the same experience, and this idea of empathy and putting yourself in other people's shoes. And so all those 12 commissions, I think, revealed stories about the city that maybe I walked in front of these places every day. The Eiffel Tower was one, how the Eiffel Tower was financed, the relationship with Haiti, and many other locations. And I commissioned choreographers who had a personal cultural history with the stories, and put on these works. And so then you find the city is this incredibly rich environment. There's all these people who walk upon the dance and never go see dance. Paris Opera the building is an extraordinary building, but a lot of society, a lot of communities in LA, in Paris, don't feel invited into it, right? We built a lot of theaters on like these old in the 50s and 60s, like these big temples that have staircases, and that a lot of people don't feel invited into, so
or they can't afford it. Yeah.
Or they can't, for that reason as well, and that probably primary reason, but not only. So the idea to go towards these, towards different community, tell these stories, like create, mix, bring people to performances that they that would be something they've never seen or never experienced, or hear about a story they didn't know is really important. So we're doing it in LA in June. We're doing this one of these events in LA in June. Yeah.
Wonderful. It's a big vision. We have one more question coming on words. I don't know if the audience can see these words, but somebody is saying dance presentation seems to be getting smaller, especially in the USA. Your two productions in LADP season in New York, the one at Perelman and the one coming up at the Armory, seem to be big and then even bigger. How do you balance scale of work with the size of team? It says the scale of the work. It's kind of what I was asking about intimacy.
Yeah. I mean, LA, Romeo and Juliet is a larger production, so we bring additional dancers for it. The company doesn't have that 18 dancer group all year right now. No, I mean, I think ultimately, lucky to become, have the opportunity to produce small works or larger works if there are works that I really have the burning desire to make. But I think ultimately, yes, there is less money in culture, and there's dance is the smallest, so the most marginal of the performing arts, and it's difficult. And so I was this was a coincidence, really, because the Armory wanted Romeo and Juliet, and then there was the Van Cleef Festival at the same time, and there
I
was
think, you know what? It's getting to be the end of the hour.
okay. Okay. Well, in any case, yeah, you have to, we obviously try to seize every opportunity of co-production and presentation and touring to create revenue and continue to make our dance project alive and vibrant. So, oops, you disappeared. No. We're off the air.
Well, thank you all for coming. I think that's it for now.
Okay, thank you.